and welcome to the Bristol 24/7 Queer Catch-Up. My name is Kit, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs.
And my name is Lowie, and my pronouns are also they, them, and theirs.
We're going to be diving in depth into some of the biggest queer stories of the week, but first, here's the rundown. A petition to create a memorial for gay activist Mark Ashton in his Northern Ireland hometown has gained almost 18,000 signatures. Although Ashton, who died in 1987 from AIDS-related illness, has a blue plaque outside London's Gays the Word bookshop, there's currently no memorial in his hometown of Country Antrim, something which campaigners hope to change. Concerns have been raised after Education Secretary Gavin Williamson introduced new measures to strengthen so-called free speech on university campuses as part of what the government is calling the war on woke. Newly appointed free speech champions will have the power to issue hefty fines to universities who cancel, dismiss, or demote people who express controversial views. Many fear that these rules will allow universities to platform transphobic, homophobic, racist or sexist people, and note that the government's own report into free speech on campus found little evidence of a so-called free speech crisis. Portishead High Street could soon have a rainbow pedestrian crossing after more than 500 people signed an online petition. The organisers of the petition say that the crossing in the colours of the progressive pride flag would show that people in the town stand for equality. Historians from Oxford University have found evidence that tolerant attitudes to homosexuality may have begun far earlier than previously thought. A 200-year-old diary written by a Yorkshire farmer contains long passages arguing that homosexuality is innate and natural, as well as recounting debates among his social circle, suggesting that opinions of ordinary people at the time may have been far more liberal than previously thought. And finally, activist Helen Fenlon, who was part of the first trans-married couple in the UK, has passed away following a 5-month battle with cancer. She was 64. That's the rundown. You're up to date.
It's so nice to be back. It's so nice to have had such amazing feedback from everyone who listened to our first episode.
Thank you guys so much for that. Thanks to anyone who listened and liked it and shared it about. It's been really, really lovely seeing how many people have really gotten into it and enjoyed what we're doing.
Yeah, and just to feel like we're adding a little bit to queer community in a time where it can feel really distant. It's just so nice. I know that me and Kit love talking to each other and talking to another queer person. So I hope that everyone listening can feel a little bit more connected to their queer family as well.
Yeah.
What we didn't actually do last week was properly introduce ourselves. So if you're interested in who these people talking at you are, my name's Lowie, as you all know, and I am Bristol 24/7's LGBTQ plus editor. I also work at the magazine, just writing general news, and also I look after the lifestyle section. But you probably see me writing a few stories, having a drink in Queen Shilling, and just generally being out and about and doing queer stuff in Bristol. But just in case you don't know who I am, that's who I am. And I just really like talking about queer stuff. So any opportunity, I'm here.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so again, I'm Kit. I'm an audio producer, sort of audio journalist and podcaster. A year or so ago, I finished a master's in radio documentary at the really awesome UE Bristol. And I really like making the content and the documentaries I make about people that don't get talked about, people that don't have their stories told. For sort of most of the documentaries I've made, that's speaking about autism and the autistic community, of which, you know, I'm autistic, as I mentioned last week, and I've made a lot of sort of documentaries and content about that. But I really enjoy talking about queerness and queer issues, and making content and making audio content about that is really awesome. And getting to do that with another awesome queer person like Lowie is a really amazing thing. And just glad that we got such a great response to it last week.
Yeah, so cool. And I think, yeah, something that we both love doing is, giving a voice to those who might, especially like mainstream media, might not ordinarily get a voice, or it might be misrepresented. So yeah, and I think that actually brings us really nicely on to our first story that we're going to talk about. A piece that I wrote about the Bristol Lesbian and Gay Switchboard, which was a space for like queer people that didn't have anywhere else to go and didn't have a place to, have community. It ran from 1975 to 2012, and it was just a really incredible piece to write and to learn about all these queer people in Bristol that helped other queer people in Bristol, and really like just saved a lot of lives in a time that was incredibly difficult. Yeah,
it's a really, really brilliant thing that you've written. And the thing that this really made me sort of think of is that, and I think this is an important thing to think about during the History Month, as younger queer people, we kind of sometimes forget that people were creating these spaces like a long, long time ago, a lot longer ago than we thought. And that queer history goes back a lot further than maybe sometimes people both within the community and like outside of the community really, really acknowledge. I don't know about you, but one of the most heartwarming things I see is seeing like older queer people or people who have come out much later in life. When I see people who are like, I realised when I was 60 that I was non-binary. Like, I see those things and they just make my little heart sing. I think it's quite tempting to think that, oh yeah, queer history began in the 80s. Like, and that's not the case.
Yeah, and like it has been, queer people have always existed. Like it's one of the things I feel like I end up telling everyone when I'm like, oh yeah, I'm non-binary. This has existed for millennia. Like this isn't anything new. But yeah, to see like older queer people come out as like trans, non-binary, or whatever, slightly less well-known identity it might be, but also like to have had this record of amazing history and LGBTQ plus history in Bristol that is actually available for us to learn about is incredible, because so much of it isn't. And the wonderful Outstories, which I was able to use Outstories Bristol to research some of this article, is like, it's wonderful. And what always strikes me is kind of, even now, like I'm pushing to write positive queer stories and stories about queer joy, but if you look back in history, what's been reported is just sadness. It's people being charged for loving the people that they love, or like being punished for it, or it's hate crimes. And so to be able to write a story as well that's a place of safety, the Switchboard was a place of safety for queer people for almost 40 years, is just also really nice. Like, it's so nice to write stories about LGBTQ plus joy.
Yeah, queer joy is something that needs to be talked about and spoken about, because also in so much of like fiction media, so many times you see a show with like a queer storyline, or a film about a queer person. So many of these times queer people were used as like a tragedy thing. Yeah. And that's not really the case. Also, the thing you were saying about, when you tell people you're non-binary, you have to sort of explain that, no, this has been around forever. This is, something that's always existed. I think it's worth pointing out that, and I'm trying to make sure I say this in sort of the correct way, so many sort of Indigenous and First Nations cultures across the world have had and continue to have open and supportive ideas of non-binary gender and of trans people. The gender binary is something that was very much sort of a colonial idea that was very much sort of enforced, and, you know, trying to erase like these indigenous cultures' much more fluid ideas of gender. You know, saying that, oh, there's only two genders is kind of a racist thing, because you're ignoring these various sort of cultures across the world. Again, it's that sort of thing of realizing, okay, queer history has always been a thing. One of the things I sort of mentioned in the rundown was that researchers from Oxford have found this diary from sort of 200 years ago of this like very ordinary like Yorkshire farmer who was talking about gay issues of the day, which kind of goes against the ideas that have sort of been perpetuated throughout sort of historical texts and readings that, oh, it was kind of accepted within sort of the aristocracy, but not among normal people. It's really interesting to see these things sort of being turned around.
Yeah, and I think I love seeing stuff like that. I mean, those ordinary accounts anyway are always fascinating, just seeing like an insight into normal people's lives that we don't normally see, because it's a very certain class of people in you know, and very certain individuals that we often hear history about, and to not only hear like ordinary recounts of just ordinary people, but also like of queerness being discussed. And I don't know, I just love, you know, despite the fact that we've had all these awful laws and awful things to go through and still go through as queer people, to have those nuggets of just like, oh, there were queer people before me and they like existed and they had conversations about being LGBTQ plus. We've always existed and there has always been queer joy. It's so nice to be reminded of that, because it can be really hard to just not feel like every time I'm talking about queerness, it's something negative, or like, it's like, oh, so yeah, did you know that we couldn't sleep with someone, men can sleep with someone of, you know, the same age of consent until the year 2000. Like, you know, I was 2 years old. Like, that's in my lifetime, you know, and it feels like I'm so often being like, oh yeah, actually it was rubbish. It was, everything has been really difficult. And to be like, oh, actually also among all this difficulty is real nuggets of queer joy. Yeah. Queer people existing.
I think so. And it's such a weird thing, realising that you know, this history has gone back so much longer than maybe younger queer people like us ever really acknowledged, but also seeing how scarily recently certain laws have changed. You know, Section 28 wasn't repealed until 2003. WHO only declassified same-sex attraction as a mental illness in 1992. You know, civil partnerships weren't enforced until 2004. The Equality Act in the sort of form it's in now was in 2010. Yeah.
It's scary. It really is scary. And I think it's really interesting as well of like seeing how quickly, I think this is like, you know, queerness in general, it's on its very like specific timeline. I feel like queer generations often are shorter than like what you traditionally think of as like a generation. But also like how quickly sort of stuff has changed within the last 40 years. Like to think that the first Pride in London was in 1972, I think it was, and they had 2,000 people there. And that's like 2 years before like the switchboard was formed. And like, that is wild. And also like thinking about the context of 2012, which is like 9 years ago, but in 2012 I was 14 and I obviously only speaking for like probably people my age, but I found a lot of my queer knowledge and community through the internet. Like I had a Tumblr blog. I was discovering loads about identities through YouTube. That was where I found it. Like I wouldn't have called someone, and that's not, you know, necessarily a bad thing. It's just like I had different ways of accessing support, and I think that's a good thing. And also Section 28 had finally been repealed in 2003 and there was, you know, it was starting to be more talked about. I'm saying that in that I had no queer education, but like it was on telly occasionally. Like you would hear about there was more queer literature that I could find. in very small ways, I was able to access this information that maybe I wouldn't have been able to access as a teenager in the 80s, 90s, 2000s.
You know, you do wonder how it must have been for, you know, queer people sort of our parents' age without sort of the internet and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's really fun. And speaking about, having no queer education, it's funny. I remember being young and not realising that bisexuality was a thing.
You had your lesbians and your gays.
You had your lesbians and your gays. It wasn't until, God, maybe I was 16 when I was like, oh, bi is a thing. Oh, well, actually, I didn't realise I could be that. And then it's like, oh, okay, I can. And do you ever have the thing where you look back at certain moments of your life before you realised you were queer and being
all the time.
Yeah, that was a gay thing.
Yeah, like all the time. I have like realization, and so I've been obsessed with Taylor Swift since I was like 11 years old. It's just like, you know how everyone has their guilty pleasure? Like, I wouldn't necessarily call it a guilty pleasure, but it is always like a little bit embarrassing to admit. And I say that from a place of deep, deep love for this very... I think I'm like convinced Taylor Swift is bisexual, but I'm not gonna go into that now. But like, you know, someone who is presenting as very straight and just very like middle of the road, like I have deep love. Anyway, like I had photos of her plastered over my wall. Like I've got every single magazine, every single CD, everything that she was in, I had. And like the other day I was like, I don't think that was because I was a fan.
No.
I don't think I think that might have been a big fat love. And also like I remember I loved the Hunger Games and was particularly obsessed with the movies. I remember everyone being like Team Gale or Team Peter, and I was like, but like Katniss? And like now I thought about this the other day and was like, oh, there was a reason I liked Katniss.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure, put it this way, I think I had a crush on my reception teacher.
Brilliant.
When, I remember thinking, oh, she's so pretty and she's so lovely. And, you know, she's so pretty and she's so kind and she's so lovely and she sings really nicely. I remember running up to her on the playground and going, you have the voice of an angel. And then running away. You know, when I think about sort of the way, you know, sort of I felt about her and sort of the picture of her I have in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that was probably a crush. And that was probably earlier than my first crush on a guy.
Oh, yeah. Like, I had this incredibly vivid memory of... It's a very specific situation. I went up to secondary school from those taster days that you used to do in like year 6.
Yeah.
And everyone was talking about their first kiss. It was just what everyone was talking about. And I have this like very clear memory of in my head going, okay, so like everyone talks about your first kiss. So your first kiss can't be with a girl. Like it has to be with a boy because everyone talks about it. And therefore it cannot be with a girl because I'm not being called a lesbian in front of everyone. And like I was 10 or 11, like, and having that like real clear distinction, I didn't realise, it always sounds weird to say, but like I didn't realise that was a gay thought.
Yeah.
Which always sounds so weird to say out loud because obviously I'm thinking about kissing girls, like, but I was like, no, I don't think I'm gay.
Well, this is the thing. So much looking back at stuff is just like, oh, this is this. And it's the thing I get kind of twofold because, again, where I'm autistic, I only sort of found out about my diagnosis when I was 18. I look back on moments in my life before that and going, oh yeah, that's because of the autism. That's because of the autism. That's because of the gay. That's because of the autism. Like looking back and piecing all this together. And it's interesting because we're talking about, you know, how we wonder, oh, what must have it been like for queer people of our parents' generation. I wonder what it's going to be like for queer people that are sort of growing up now. I wonder how they're going to look at us. You know, I just wonder how they're going to look at us and the way that we interpreted and discovered our queerness. The fact that, you know, for them sort of growing up, it's something that's, you know, so much more broadly in media, you know.
Yeah. I might get these names mixed up because I wasn't allowed to watch Tracy Beaker when I was a kid because my mum thought it was too rude. But I've seen a lot of the discourse around, is it Cam, I think, who's got finally married a woman in the latest Tracy Beaker show that was on. And
I hadn't heard about this.
Finally married a woman, and the cast were like, cool, yeah, we wanted this to happen.
I think I remember that being a thing actually in one of the later Tracy Beaker books, that Cam was like in a relationship with a woman.
Yeah, so they were like, because she got married to a man, I think, originally, and everyone was like, yeah, like, no, she's clearly someone who loves women. The cast apparently were like, yeah, no, we wanted her to marry a woman, but like the original Tracy Beaker series aired in like their mid-noughties. Like Section 28 had just been repealed.
Yeah.
But the world just wasn't ready for Tracy Beaker queerness, which is, yeah, like, the people today will, you know, they've got like incredibly just like awesome. Even their animation is diverse.
Oh my god, are we talking about Blue's Clues? Are we talking about Blue's Clues?
Yeah, like, oh my god, it was beautiful.
It was so sweet. Sorry, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about right now, Blue's Clues, which is something I watched when I was young, and actually when I showed this clip to my mum, she was like so happy. She was like, I used to watch this with you so much when we were, you know, when you were little, and like, oh, it's so lovely that they're doing that. Blue's Clues basically put out an alphabet song, and it was quite a different kind of alphabet song. And of the sort of, you know, A is for this and B is for that, one of the ones was P is for pride, and it's like, and P is full of pride. That was it. The letter P is full of pride. And it's not just, you know, that they did that, and it was this letter P, and it was surrounded by various different pride flags. It was the fact, the way they went about it as well was really good. Like, the way they did it with the flags. So the letter P itself had the progressive pride flag with like the trans stripes and the, you know, the black and brown stripes for queer people of colour, which is awesome. But also the flags like going around, like they included the intersex flag as well, which a lot of things like miss out. And it's like, fair play, you guys like did your research.
Right, like, I'm looking at it here, and like, you've got like the inclusive lesbian flag.
Yeah.
You've got, like the gender fluid flag, the pan flag, non-binary flag.
Yeah.
Like, and the asexual flag, I think that is as well. Yeah. Incredible.
That's the thing. They went for it, and it's like, fair play. And it shows that it's more than just kind of a token thing. It's nice, and it's, and I just hope that, you know, sort of people growing up with this sort of thing don't ever have to have the thing that we had where it's, oh, I didn't realise I could be that. Like, you just know that that's an option. And then, obviously, there's still the internal kind of challenge that I think everyone, queer or not, goes through. But for queer people, it's a bit more of a thing of kind of figuring out who you are and where you fit. I hope that it's more of... It's an easier process because the discovery of sort of what's out there is less hard. I hope that that's something that is a thing for sort of kids growing up, and I do wonder how they're going to look back at us.
Yeah, I hope fondly.
I hope so. I hope they understand we're trying. Yeah. We're doing our best to make a better world for you know, sort of younger queer people. Yeah,
that's all I want. All I want is for, like, imagining, like, 10-year-old me who was like, oh, I could kiss a girl. The equivalent of 10-year-old me now would not have to feel so, like, ashamed or scared, or like that's something they couldn't be, and instead be like, oh, cool, I saw this on Blue's Clues, or like, oh, I saw a woman marry a woman on Tracy Beaker. Like, that's something you could do, like, and more queer people in their communities. Yes, like openly queer people
in their real life as well. So this is probably a good time to bring on our very first guest that we've ever had on the Bristol 24/7 Queer Catch Up. Please welcome Jamie Jamal. So Jamie, if you'd just like to introduce yourself, you know, just say a little bit about what it is you do.
Sure. So my pronoun is he, him. I identify as non-binary. I don't know if that's important. I just thought I'd say it. And I'm thrilled to be your first guest. So what I do is make music in Bristol, basically, electronic music. I've been releasing in a band called This Human Condition for About 6 years. Prior to that, I've been in lots of other various different bands, like rock bands, that kind of thing. And during lockdown, obviously, our strength is really as a live act. So that we kind of stopped. We just took a break. We were going to take a break anyway due to ill health with the other member. So we had planned to do 2021 as a break with this human condition and free us up to work on, some separate projects. So I started another project last year called Flux. And we released one song called Handbag Punk last September. So I basically perform in Bristol and around the UK. And that's me.
Cool. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it really, really sounds brilliant. And I'm sure Lowie has as well. Like, I've had a listen to your stuff, and it is really, really cool.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I think talks about some really important things. I think there's one song of yours in particular where you talk about depression and also ADHD, which that's something I have.
Oh, really?
And any time I hear songs talking about ADHD is a really awesome thing for me, because it's like, oh, hey, not alone.
Well, I grew up with my brother who's ADHD, who that's about. So, sure, it's difficult, isn't it?
It's difficult and awesome in equal measure.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Brains are just weird, aren't they?
Yep.
Sure. I mean, when my brother in the sort of late 80s, well, mid 80s, I guess, to 90s. I mean, they just didn't. There wasn't that support that there is now. So I think he found it really difficult to relate to the world and the world relate to him.
As well as sort of making songs about that, one of the things that you do that I sort of found particularly interesting and particularly relevant given it's History Month is some of the songs you've written about, really important figures in queer history, like Alan Turing and Mark Ashton. One thing I've noticed is so much of the time when you see kind of biographies of queer figures, it's in the form of film or television.
Yeah.
Like, the film Pride, obviously about, Mark Ashton and LGSM.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You could go on. But most of the music you hear about the queer experience is about queer struggles in the here and now, rather than like kind of biographical songs. And I think that's something that's really unique about your music, Jamie. What sort of kind of led you to write these songs about these kind of historical figures?
Well, I'm really interested in history anyway, especially queer history. And to my shame, I didn't know as much as I thought I did when I started, deciding to write about it. I mean, I know the Alan Turing story, that wasn't allowed to be talked about for 50 years. So I actually wrote that song on the day I heard it on the radio. I was just washing up. I heard about this chap called Alan Turing, who was a gay man that had been royally pardoned. And then I was obviously pleased for that bit, but then I thought, actually, that's a bit socially selective. What about all those other people that are still living with the effects of that? Yeah. That's a bit of a slap in the face for them, surely, if they're hearing this news today. So I started researching it, and I wrote, it was actually Christmas Eve, I think. Yeah, and I wrote most of the lyrics. That day, my boyfriend was hounding me because we were going out. I was like, no, I just got to write a bit more.
Enjoy Christmas.
It's like, see ya. To be honest, I would have quite happily just sat with that for a couple of days, but...
Just those Christmas celebrations, they just don't start, do they?
No. And so other subjects, I mean, although I seem to have written about a lot of gay men, I'm very conscious of the fact that I haven't really written about other interesting characters. I mean, I've written about Sylvester, Divine, I've touched on Klaus Nomi, Lee Bowery, Quentin Crisp, but I'd like, I've been discovering some women, not decided which ones yet, but I think women get a bit overlooked.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's, obviously, I think there's probably countless reasons why that is.
Sure.
But,
Boys Club.
Yeah, but I think to write any music about queerness and queer history is, I mean, we were speaking a little bit before you came on about like how difficult it is to access queer history and to have someone, creating music, which isn't, how we often see it. It's just like, it's so great to have another accessible way to hear about that history we might not have known about.
Yeah, and that point of view of writing really is if even just a few people discover the Alan Turing story or Mark Ashton through my song, and then it leads them to more, or going to Bletchley Park or seeing the Pride movie or whatever, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Like, I think more queerness is always a good thing. It just seems like queer the world. And
Bristol is quite good, I think. I'm particularly a big fan of the alternative queer scene in Bristol, things like Punker and Wig in a Box and...
Yes, we love them. And I love Claire Lowe, Wig in the Box. It's just so good. Yeah, it's so good. And Stu from Punker, right?
Sure.
Yeah, also amazing.
I performed at a few of Claire's events, and I'm supposed to be doing some Punker ones, but obviously that got cancelled.
I mean, we just need... one of the main reasons I also want this pandemic to be over, just so I can go and enjoy some queer spaces. And I just want to go to Claire, one of their Wig in the Box nights. I'm just having a groove in Queen Shilling, it's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, well, I put on these We All Play Synth nights with a few other people as well. Electronic sort of open mic nights, really. I mean, we do a showcase at Rough Trade Bristol as well once a year.
Nice.
The Green Bank in Easton? So we've got the upstairs bit that we do, we try to do every month. Well, we did. Yeah, and I'd like to, for some reason, I haven't really attached it to reach out to the queer audience, although we have had a few. Because I host it as well. Or compare it, and I've not really thought to put it out to the queer. There must be loads of queer musicians out there, and the idea of the We All Play Synth things is mainly for people who just want to try it, who've never done it before. That's the kind of people we want.
Just, I guess, or even just having, not necessarily have it as a queer thing, but just to have a queer friendly.
That's what I mean. Queer friendly. Sure. Yeah.
I think, seeing other queers doing stuff and being like, cool, that's a queer, I'll go along to that. It's so often what I do, right?
And more women too. I mean, there's often loads of guys lining up.
Let's get you women and non-binary
I want to give it more, some non-binary people, so that it's more representative, because I think the audience are so accepting of lots of electronic weird noises anyway.
Yeah, have some different people.
Yeah, and there's some, I've put on a lot of events at Crofters Rights and got other bands from other places. There's a chap called Derek who goes under the name of Jan Doyle Band. I mean, he pours blood over himself.
Wow.
But yeah, he's great, and obviously he comes from Sheffield, and when he was telling me when he does it up there, I mean, the audiences are just a gasp. They come here and Bristol people really sort of get on board, don't they, and celebrate that. And he was like, "Oh, they actually get me and like it."
I've always said to people, Bristol is the city of giving absolutely no Fs in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Bristol is really accepting of just out there-ness.
Yeah, and I live in Stokes Croft, so I'm sort of around it all the time, and I love it. God, actually, I love it.
One of the really cool things about your music is it's the kind of thing you 100% could see yourself hearing in a club environment. And I think bringing that history to a place where you kind of might not necessarily expect it would be a really cool thing to be doing. And, the events that you're putting on and the events that you're performing at. I wonder, what do you think is the best way to kind of maybe get more people to engage with creating music and creating art around queer history?
Well, social media is a good start, especially at the moment. I mean, with my mental health, I have to sort of watch that a bit, because although it's valuable for my art and getting the word out, and I'm lucky to have a little bit of a following, there comes a time where you have to put that down and think, right, I just need to, see some trees. I mean, trees in particular for me, I just feel energized and back to me,
Yeah, and that as a creative person is so valuable to go outside, feel re-energized. And although, yeah, like social media is great, and I think a lot of us are like, you know, connecting with other queers and, you know, other communities that we have via social media. But yeah, I just love a good tree.
Brandon Hill is my favourite spot.
Excellent trees.
Beautiful.
And there's actually a tree there there's got a little plaque on it that it was born, I think it was just the year before me. So in tree form, I can see what, if I was a tree, how I might look. The tree looks better than me, I must say. But you don't often know how old trees are, do you? Unless you're a tree expert, and I'm not. So when you know that, oh, that was sort of planted the year before I was born,
yeah.
I just love that. So I often gravitate towards that tree.
Yeah.
Well, I always look to nature for advice, more so than I would humans. I haven't got any animals, but if I did, I'd probably, you know, them as well. They're quite magical creatures, flowers, trees, plants, stuff like that. I don't know. It's always just given me, but I just always look to that stuff when I'm in times of, you know, needing that.
Given everything that's going on, like, it's so nice to... Yeah.
And what I do like about all this, sorry to interrupt,
you go.
is the fact that the world has slowed down. I do like that aspect, I must admit, because it was a little too crazy and fast for me at times.
Yeah.
It's given us time to just breathe and think. And I find I don't often have time to process. I don't know about you.
But like now, you know, there is less happening. And although that is really difficult, you know, it can be nice to...
I mean, I definitely get my days where I just want to run to a club and do star jumps.
God, yeah. Definitely. Like, I have my days where I'm just like, can you get me a pub? Or like in the sweaty basement of the Exchange. And then I also have days where I'm like,
Gigs.
I'm really glad to have time to go for a walk around the park.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh,
go for it.
Where do you go out if you? I mean, no, we can't at the moment. But where are you comfortable?
Yeah,
in Bristol?
It's a good question.
So it really depends on the vibe I'm on. A lot of the time is based on the music that I want to hear.
Me too.
In terms of sort of places I feel good and feel safe, it's Friendly Records Bar. I really love.
Yeah.
Absolutely adore. I don't know, I guess kind of like smaller spaces a lot of the time, unless I'm like, right, let's go out, we're partying, you know. Let's go, we're partying. Yeah.
And then I would probably say, I love the Old Market Tavern for my free drinks. Yes. And then Exchange, Queen
That's an old haunt of mine. Yeah.
It's there's just always a few queers in there, you know? Yeah. And then I know like the Exchange as well, like predominantly the music that I like.
Yeah.
Although the nights I like are.
I love the Exchange when, is it Don't Tell Your Mother? That's the one. I mean, I know they have it at the Phoenix, but I prefer it at the Exchange or the Arnafini or somewhere like that.
I was going to say the Phoenix as a pub is a really good...
it's a great pub, it's not a place to dance for me.
I've had many a long and happy night in the Phoenix.
Sure.
You know.
But yeah, I do love the Exchange as a venue for that night.
Yeah, for sure. Oh God, I'd almost forgotten about Don't Tell Your Mother. It's one of my favourites. Oh, yeah. I love it.
Do you remember Wonky as well? Years
no,
previous.
I see. I'm not like new to Bristol, but I've only been here 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So probably a bit before me. What I do love about Bristol and like continue to love is like at least it's quite small. Like it has its cons, but it does mean that you can walk from place to place really easily.
Oh yeah.
Can have like
it's
a
sort of like a mini London, isn't it, without the underground?
I've heard people describe it as that before, in that, you know, you've got quite sort of different kind of areas and quite sort of things, you know, there's like Clifton is very different to Stokescroft, which is very different again to, you know, like Easton.
Clifton would definitely be the West End, wouldn't it? Clifton. And Easton always reminds me of the East End.
Listen, it's been really, really awesome having you, Jamie. We're going to sort of wrap up. Where can people find your stuff? If people want to hear more of you, where can we find you?
So I'm on every platform, basically. I either look for me as Jamie Jamal, Flux, or This Human Condition, at Mr. Jamie Jamal on Twitter, Instagram, at Condition This for This Human Condition, at Flux Music UK for Flux. You should find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been really, really lovely talking to you.
You're welcome, and really good luck with your podcast. I was thrilled to hear that there was a new one popped up.
Thank you. So, on to sort of our next story. This is another really awesome piece written by Lowie.
And a hair flick.
You gotta do a hair flick, celebrate yourself. So we're talking about this really, really awesome art project that's going to be happening this spring called Undisciplined. And it's a load of discussions and workshops all happening on Zoom. This group of people are going to be sort of creating art, talking about how societal norms, social structures, and institutional sort of structures and things negatively affect queer people. And it's going to be sort of, the exhibit of it will be happening in April 2021, is what I meant to say. Being run by Giles. They're just trying to explore how structural violence is a big issue, because a lot of people are talking about how individual actors, individual people, like individual, hate crimes and, acts of queerphobia happen, but people aren't necessarily talking about, and this is something I agree with, people aren't necessarily talking about how the way the world is structured causes quite a lot of issues for queer people.
Yeah, and I think it's specifically looking like, a lot of like family, education, religion, and like how that kind of encourages heteronormativity. So, being like straight as the norm, and also, I don't know what you would call it, maybe cis-normativity? I don't know. I might just make a word up there.
That's a term I've definitely heard.
Cool.
Like,
so like the being, trans is like abnormal, and the norm is to be a cisgender person. Yeah, and these places inherently encourage that, and that can cause like so much. Like that is, you're not born being like transphobic or homophobic. It's these places and these institutions that are having a massive, massively adding to this issue.
I completely agree, and I think certain aspects of things in regards to even just like the level of admin you have to go through, like as a trans person, and things that completely have no need to have gender markers, having gender markers. When I put my legal name change through, I've managed to change my name with pretty much everything apart from my medical records, because that's just, it's impossible to find out how to do that. People are saying, just show up to your GP, but they wouldn't acknowledge my deed poll for some reason. And then that leads to situations where, I was trying to have a finger stitched up in hospital, and, a healthcare assistant said to me, this person came up and, used my birth name. And I said, sort of explained. And he turned around and went, well, no, this is what I have written here. And I said, well, no. This is it. And he said, no, this is what I have written here, this is what I'm calling you. And,
that's awful.
And it leads to, and that's a situation that was one individual person. Everyone else in that hospital was being lovely and wonderful about it. Everyone else being lovely about it. It was very much this one person, but also, had it not been such a admin pain in the, so difficult, so many bureaucratic processes, there wouldn't have even been the opportunity for that to happen. And the Gender Recognition Act, like that's a whole podcast in itself, the Gender Recognition Act. Good Lord.
Oh my gosh. I'm not, that is a whole other podcast. We will get into that another time.
Oh, believe me. Yeah. That might be a very special episode. Like, that might be a whole different thing we do.
Kit and Lowie rant about the Gender Recognition Act for an hour. Yeah. But I remember sitting in my A-level sociology class, but like learning about like institutions of like the family, of school, of work, and learning about, how they reinforce like patriarchy and how they reinforce gender stereotypes, like XYZ, all these different things. And actually it's really interesting to then look at that now and be like, oh yeah, these things also enforce the fact that women and men marry, you know, as well as like pushing on the nuclear family, mum, dad and 2 kids, also being like, oh yeah, obviously it's a mum, dad, obviously it's 2 kids. Like, yeah, whereas like these places need to catch up.
This is, again, this is the thing. And just the fact that things are just gendered unnecessarily. Like, there's this kind of expectation that there needs to be gender in everything. We talked about bathrooms last week. And what I didn't mention, which I remembered, was at a, like, sports, like, climbing place I go, a while back, they were having their changing rooms and bathrooms, like, completely redone. So what they had to have instead were individual, like, portaloos outside the building, right? Fair enough. Now, bear in mind, these were all individual portaloos. They put male and female signs on them.
No.
Why? No. Why? Like, but that's just so unnecessary. It's just individual portaloos. Why do you need to put gender signs in this? Why? To a certain extent, it's kind of hard to blame individual people because we've all grown up in a society that so enforces, like, this is the way things are done.
Yeah.
And, you know, that kind of makes people think, oh, we have to do these things. These things are the default. And it's... And again, this is something similar to, you know, what we said last week. We're talking about these things as, you know, sort of the institutional issues we've faced as, you know, as queer people. But again, we are both white. Like, this has got to be a whole lot worse for, you know, people.
Yeah, white, able-bodied, you know, live in a country where we're not going to get, like, arrested or murdered by the state for who we are. Like, we've got all these things working in our favour, and yet, like... I can still go into a bathroom labelled female and be scared about being beaten up. Or like vice versa, going in the male loo. But like, I think what's really interesting as well about this project is like, it's going to look at, I think using art as a tool is going to be super interesting and super useful because like, I feel like these are such big things, right? Like the family is so personal. It's such a big thing to sort of think about. You know, I feel like it's almost impossible to sit here as like 2 queer people and be like, you know what needs to change? The idea of a nuclear family, like that's not going to happen overnight. But to use art as a tool and as like a way to like amplify those ideas, I think will be really interesting to see.
And I think it's something we definitely need more of. I mean, in Bristol, full stop. And I think, you know, Giles is very much right when they say that, you know, structural violence is something that isn't really discussed in the same way as, you know, individual actors and things like that are really sort of discussed. And I think it'll be a really interesting thing to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's like April 2021.
Yeah, April this year. Yeah.
Yeah, Creative Youth Network are with them. Yep. So it's going to be, fascinating. And yeah, really interesting. And it'd be so cool to see how people use art to kind of,
So we've got all these things sort of happening, happening in April. Let's have a little look and see what else is going to be happening in Bristol, in Bristol's queer community.
Yeah.
Let's have a little look. So, Friday, February 26th, which I believe is when this will be going out, we've got a couple of things going on. Aberration, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, and my friend Reese is going to absolutely slaughter me for pronouncing this wrong. Cymru? Is it Cymru?
Cymru?
So, Cymru? God, I am so sorry to any Welsh people.
Yeah, every single Welsh person listening, I'm so sorry. We butchered that.
Either way.
But we love you.
I'm so sorry. Cheryl Morgan is going to be talking about gender diversity in early Britain as part of this organisation's celebration of Queer History Month. UE Bristol also on the same day, going to be the UE Bristol LGBT plus staff network and the Uni of Bristol LGBT plus staff network are going to be hosting a film screening via teleparty of The Miseducation of Cameron Post.
It's going to be great.
Saturday, February 27th, the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. There's a show by this Bristol theatre maker, Tom Marshman, telling queer stories around Shakespeare, talking about queer stories surrounding Shakespeare. It's called Shakespeare. It's totally free. And yeah, that's hosted by the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. More broadly, another queer house party is going to be happening. Lowie and I are both going.
I'm already excited to get dolled up for it.
Oh, I am hyped. I am really hyped for this.
Yeah. If you don't know what queer house party is, it's like a monthly normally, sort of like a party, surprise, surprise. And everyone is on Zoom, and it's like very like political, but also just got some really great tunes. Runs from like 9 p.m. till 8 on these Fridays. So yeah, if you're just searching queer house party, you'll find it. But yeah, me and Kit are both so excited.
Yeah. I think that's the 26th as well, isn't it? Which is, again, when this goes out, that is tonight. Hopefully there'll still be tickets and things going. So definitely get involved with that. I believe, if I'm not wrong, they donate a portion of sort of profits to various queer charities.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case. And also, like, you can attend for free, but also donations are welcome, and donations go to queer performers that are there as well. Yeah. Because obviously our pandemic is a difficult time.
Yeah, for anyone in the creative industry, it is a hard time. So it's been really, really awesome getting to do this again. Thank you so much for listening. If you're listening, please share this around. And yeah, we hope to see you soon. Hope to see you sort of next week. Next week after, whenever. Hope to see you soon. My name is Kit Million Ross.
And I am Lowie Trevina.
And thanks for tuning into the Bristol 24/7 Queer Catch-Up.
We'll see you in a fortnight.
See you in a fortnight.